The diplomatic station called Meridian Gateway floated in the dark between stars, a massive structure of metal and light that housed representatives from hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. Ambassador Jake Collins stood at the viewing window of the human quarters, watching ships arrive and depart, each one carrying beings so different from humanity that it still made his head spin to think about Earth had joined the galactic community only 6 months ago, and everything still felt new and overwhelming. The Universal Species Summit was humanity's first major diplomatic event, a chance to prove that Earth deserved its place among the stars. And Jake felt the weight of that responsibility on his shoulders every moment. "Ambassador, the briefing is ready," Lieutenant Ben Morris said from behind him, holding a datapad that glowed with information about the various species they would encounter. Jake turned away from the window and took the pad, scrolling through pages of alien cultures, customs, and protocols. There were so many rules to remember, so many ways to accidentally insult someone or start an interstellar incident. "Tell me about the Vorkai again," Jake said. Though he had already read the file 3 times, Ben's expression became serious, almost fearful. "The Vorkai are the most dangerous species in known space, sir. They stand nearly 3 meters tall at the shoulder, massive 4-legged predators with black fur that seems to drink in light itself. Their eyes glow amber, and they move like liquid death." Jake studied an image on the pad showing a Vorkai in full warrior stance. The creature looked like a nightmare made flesh, all muscle and claw and predatory grace. They come from Vorkan Prime, which makes Earth look like a vacation resort. Ben continued. "Gravity twice what we're used to, megafauna that would terrify a dinosaur, and weather patterns that include acid rain and electromagnetic storms. The Vorkai evolved at the top of the food chain, and they've never forgotten it." "And their military record?" Jake asked, though he knew the answer. 12,000 years of recorded history, and they've never lost a battle, Ben said quietly. "Not one. They serve as peacekeepers for the galaxy, and most species are too terrified to challenge them. When the Vorkai arrive at a conflict, it ends immediately." Jake nodded, absorbing this information. The galaxy clearly respected the Vorkai, feared them even, and humanity needed to be very careful in how they interacted with such a powerful species. "Now tell me the most important thing," Jake said. Looking Ben in the eyes, Ben took a breath. "Never, under any circumstances, touch a Vorkai without explicit permission. Physical contact is sacred to their culture, reserved only for family, mates, and blood enemies. To touch a Vorkai without invitation is to declare yourself one of those 3 things. And if you're not family or a mate, you're declaring yourself an enemy." Jake finished. "And they kill enemies on sight," Ben added. "No trial, no discussion, no mercy. It's happened 17 times in galactic history, and all 17 species who violated the rule lost members. The Vorkai consider unwanted touch to be the ultimate violation, and they respond with absolute force." Jake set down the pad and straightened his uniform. "So we keep our distance, we show respect, and we don't make any sudden moves." "Exactly, sir." The briefing continued for another hour, covering dozens of other species and their customs. But Jake's mind kept returning to the Vorkai. Something about them fascinated him even as it worried him. Perhaps because they reminded him of Earth's own apex predators, the great cats and wolves that humanity had once feared and learned to respect later. Jake stood in the grand atrium where the opening ceremony would take place. The space was enormous, with a transparent dome overhead showing the stars beyond, and multiple levels connected by ramps and platforms. Alien species filled the area, speaking in languages that his translators struggled to process, creating a background hum of incomprehensible sound. Then the Vorkai entered, and the entire atrium fell silent. 4 of them moved through the space with perfect coordination, their massive bodies flowing like water. The leader was clearly the largest, his black fur marked with intricate silver patterns that designated rank and clan. The other three followed slightly behind. Younger, but no less impressive, every species in the atrium moved out of their path, creating a corridor of empty space at least 5 meters wide. No one spoke, no one approached. Everyone showed the same mixture of respect and fear. "That's Ambassador Krelver," Ben whispered beside Jake. "He's led the Vorkai delegation for 20 years. Considered one of their finest warriors and diplomats." Jake watched as Krelver moved to the Vorkai delegation area, his amber eyes scanning the crowd with an intelligence that was almost frightening. This was no simple beast, no matter how animal his form appeared. This was a being of vast experience and capability. The 3 younger Vorkai settled around Krelver in a protective formation. One of them, a female judging by the slightly smaller build and different pattern of markings, kept her gaze moving constantly, assessing threats. "The female is Vera," Ben said, following Jake's gaze. "She's being trained as a warrior diplomat. The other 2 are Drakethur and Throck, both combat specialists learning the political side of their duties." Jake filed away the names, knowing that proper address would be important if any interaction occurred. He had no intention of approaching the Vorkai directly, but in diplomatic settings, you never knew what might happen. The ceremony began with a traditional greeting from the station's administrator, a floating jellyfish-like being called a Quirrell, who spoke in melodious tones about unity and cooperation. One by one, species presented themselves, showcasing their cultures through displays of technology, art, or performance. The Vorkai presentation came in the middle of the schedule. Krelver stepped forward alone, and the atrium fell silent again. What followed was a demonstration of combat technique that left Jake breathless. Krelver moved through forms that combined grace and power in ways that seemed impossible for something so large, his body flowing from stance to stance with perfect control. He incorporated holographic opponents that appeared around him, and he defeated them all in seconds. His movements precise and devastating. But what struck Jake most was not the violence of the display, but the restraint. Every strike stopped exactly where it needed to. Every movement calculated to disable rather than kill, showing that the Vorkai understood the difference between warrior and murderer. When the demonstration ended, Krelver bowed to the assembly, and the respect in that gesture somehow made him seem even more formidable. Earth's presentation came near the end. Jake stepped forward with the rest of the human delegation, and he delivered the speech he had prepared about humanity's hopes for cooperation and learning, about Earth's desire to contribute to galactic society while respecting the wisdom of older civilizations. Some species seemed receptive, nodding or making sounds of approval through their translators. Others appeared skeptical, probably wondering what these young upstarts from a barely explored backwater could possibly offer. As Jake spoke, he felt eyes on him and glanced toward the Vorkai delegation. Krelver watched him with those amber eyes, his expression unreadable but his attention complete. The ceremony concluded, and delegates began to mingle in the atrium, forming groups and starting conversations. Jake moved through the crowd with Ben at his side, trying to make connections and learn about the various species. An hour passed in introductions and polite exchanges. Jake spoke with crystalline beings who communicated through light patterns, with insectoid creatures who smelled like flowers, with aquatic species in mobile water tanks, and with dozens of others whose forms defied easy description. He carefully maintained the 5-meter distance from the Vorkai, as did everyone else. The 4 massive predators had their own space, a circle of emptiness that moved with them wherever they went. Jake found himself near one of the viewing platforms, a railed area that looked down at the level below. He was discussing trade possibilities with a representative from the Thornook, a species that looked like animated crystal sculptures. When he heard Ada's scream cut through the conversation, high-pitched and terrified, the universal sound of a child in danger, Jake's head snapped toward the sound, his body already moving before his mind caught up. On the platform railing, a small alien child clung desperately to the metal. Its 6 limbs losing their grip one by one. The child was Chittick, an insectoid species, no more than 4 years old in human equivalent. Its guardian stood frozen several meters away, too far to reach in time, mandibles clicking in panic. Other delegates noticed but seemed paralyzed, their instincts not geared for immediate action. Precious seconds ticked by as the child's grip weakened. The child fell, its small body tumbling toward the floor 40 meters below Jake's mind, registered distances, angles, possibilities. He was too far away to reach the child directly. Even at a full sprint, but between him and the falling child stood Krelver, the massive Vorkai who had moved to that exact spot during the mingling. Jake didn't think. He didn't calculate. He didn't consider consequences or remember briefings about sacred cultural rules. His body moved on pure instinct. The same instinct that had driven humanity to protect its young for millions of years. The same instinct that made humans run into burning buildings and dive into deep water without hesitation when children were in danger. Jake's. The silence that filled the atrium felt like a physical weight pressing down on every being present. Jake Collins lay on the lower deck floor, his back aching from the impact and his ankles screaming in pain. But his arms remained locked around the small, Chittick child who trembled against his chest. The child's parents rushed forward, their mandibles clicking rapidly in what Jake's translator identified as extreme distress mixed with relief. They carefully took their child from Jake's arms, checking every limb and antenna while making soothing sounds. Jake struggled to sit up, his vision swimming from pain and adrenaline. He managed to get himself into a sitting position against a nearby support column, his injured ankle stretched out in front of him above him. At the railing 40 meters up, Krelver stood motionless. The massive Vorkai's amber eyes glowed like hot coals in the station's light. Fixed on Jake with an intensity that made it hard to breathe, Ben Morris appeared at the top of the stairs, his face pale with terror, already running down toward the lower level. Other humans in the delegation stood frozen at various points around the upper atrium, their expressions showing the same fear. Every alien species present knew what had happened. Jake could see it in the way they backed away, creating even more space around the Vorkai delegation, in the way their translators whispered to each other in shocked tones, in the way some had already begun recording this moment for their archives. They expected to witness an execution. The Vorkai began to move. Krelver's massive body tensed, and in one fluid motion that showcased the terrifying athleticism of his species, he leaped from the upper level. 40 meters meant nothing to a Vorkai. Krelver landed on the lower deck with barely a sound, his 4 legs absorbing the impact that would have shattered a human's bones. And he straightened to his full height just 3 meters from where Jake sat up close. The Vorkai ambassador was even more imposing than Jake had realized. His shoulders stood level with where Jake's head would be if he were standing, and each of his legs was thicker than Jake's torso. The obsidian fur rippled over muscles that could crush steel, and those amber eyes seemed to look directly into Jake's soul. The 3 younger Vorkai followed their leader down, landing in formation around Jake and Krelver. Vera positioned herself to Jake's left, Drakethur to his right, and Throck behind him, creating a circle that cut off any escape route not that Jake could run, even if he wanted to. His ankle was definitely broken or badly sprained, and his body felt like one massive bruise band reached the bottom of the stairs. Breathing hard, but he froze when he saw the Vorkai formation. His hand moved toward the small communicator at his belt, probably thinking about calling for help. But what help could possibly arrive in time, and what help could stand against the Vorkai? The Chittick parents had moved back with their child, watching with their compound eyes wide. Other species began to gather at the railings above. Drawn by the drama unfolding below, Krelver circled Jake slowly, his movements predatory and deliberate. Each massive paw made no sound on the deck floor despite his weight, and his tail swayed behind him in a pattern that Jake's instincts read as dangerous. Jake met the Vorkai's gaze as steadily as he could manage through the pain. He knew he had broken the sacred rule, knew he had touched Krelver without permission, used the ambassador's body as a launching point without a moment's hesitation. He also knew he would do it again without a second thought if it meant saving that child. "You touched me." "Human." Krelver's voice rumbled like distant thunder, deep and resonant. He spoke in Galactic Common so that everyone present could understand, his words carrying clearly through the silent atrium. "Do you know what this means in my culture?" Jake nodded once, not trusting his voice. His throat felt tight with adrenaline and pain. "Speak," Krelver commanded. "Let all hear your words." Jake swallowed and found his voice. "Yes, I know. I was briefed on Vorka customs. I know that physical contact is sacred to your people. That touching you without permission means declaring myself either family, mate, or enemy. And yet you touched me," Krelver continued. "Still circling, you placed your hands on my body. Used me as a tool, without asking, without hesitation, without fear of the consequences." "Yes," Jake said. Simplic Rover stopped directly in front of Jake, leaning down so that his massive head was level with the human's. "Why?" The question hung in the air between them. Jake glanced past Krelver to where the Chittick child clung to its parent. "Alive and safe, because that child was going to die," Jake said, his voice steady despite the pain and fear. There was no time to ask permission. There was no time to think about rules or consequences or diplomatic protocols. There was only time to act, and you were in the position I needed to reach the child. "You knew the rule," Krelver said. "You knew the punishment for breaking it. I did, and still you touched me. I would do it again," Jake said, meeting those amber eyes directly. "That child's life mattered more than any rule, more than my safety, more than diplomatic relations between our species. Children are precious, innocent, deserving of protection. I couldn't stand there and watch it die when I had even the smallest chance to save it." A sound rippled through the watching crowd above, species translating Jake's words to each other. Some seemed confused by his reasoning. Others appeared moved, but all waited to see what the Vorkai would do. Vera moved closer, speaking in rapid Vorkai that Jake's translator couldn't quite catch. Krelver responded in the same language. His tone firm, but not angry. Drakther and Thrak shifted their positions, no longer blocking Jake's escape routes, but instead standing more like guards than captors. Krelver turned back to Jake, his amber eyes seeming to glow brighter. "You did not calculate odds or weigh diplomatic consequences. You did not consider your own safety or the sacred laws of my people. You saw death approaching an innocent, and your body moved to prevent it." "Yes," Jake agreed, unsure where this was leading but sensing a shift in the atmosphere. "This is the warrior's instinct," Krelver said, his voice carrying through the atrium. "This is the protector's heart. You acted without thought for yourself, only for the life of another." Jake said nothing, waiting. "Tell me, Jake Collins," Krelver continued, "are you a warrior by training?" "No," Jake admitted. "I'm a diplomat. I was chosen for this mission because I'm good with words, with negotiation, with finding peaceful solutions to problems." For the first time, a sound emerged from Krelver that might have been laughter, though it rumbled like rocks grinding together in an avalanche. "Good with words," he says, and yet in a moment of crisis, he had no words. Only action, only instinct, only the drive to protect. The massive Vorkai straightened to his full height again, and when he spoke next, his voice rang with authority that demanded attention from every being in the station. "Humans of Earth, Delegates of the galaxy, hear now the judgment of Krelver. Ambassador of the Vorkai Collective, he announced. Jake Collins of Earth has touched me without permission. He has broken the sacred law that governs contact with my people. By ancient tradition, this contact carries meaning that cannot be ignored or forgiven. The crowd above leaned forward, species holding their breath or whatever equivalent they possessed. But the nature of contact matters. Krelver continued. Intent shapes meaning. Action reveals character. Jake Collins did not touch me in challenge or hatred. He did not touch me to assert dominance or show disrespect. He touched me in the act of protecting innocent life, using whatever means necessary to achieve that protection. Krelver placed one massive paw on Jake's shoulder. His claws carefully retracted so they wouldn't pierce skin. The weight of it was substantial but controlled, gentle despite the strength behind it. Among my people, family touches freely because trust is absolute, Krelver said. We touch those we would die to protect, those whose lives matter as much as our own. Jake Collins used my body to save a child, not because he trusted me to allow it, but because the child's need outweighed all other considerations, including his own survival. The Vorkai ambassador's voice grew stronger, resonating with emotion that Jake had not expected from such a fearsome being. This human demonstrated the highest value of Vorkai culture. The strong exist to protect the weak, not to dominate them. He showed us that humanity understands this truth in their very bones, in their instincts, in their reflexes before thought can interfere. Krelver looked down at Jake again, and this time there was something in those amber eyes that might have been respect, might even have been warmth. Jake Collins, by your action, by your instinct, by your complete disregard for your own safety in the service of protecting innocent life, you have touched me as family touches, Krelver declared. You have shown the heart of a Vorkai in a human form. Gasps and shocked sounds rippled through the watching crowd. Ben Morris stood frozen on the stairs, his expression transforming from terror to disbelief. I claim you as Vorkai kin, Krelver announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the atrium. You are under the protection of the Vorkai Collective. Your pack is our pack. Your enemies are our enemies. Your honor is our honor. Let it be known across all worlds. Earth has earned the respect of Vorkai. The declaration hung in the air like thunder after lightning. Species began speaking all at once, their translators creating a cacophony of sound. News of what happened in the atrium spread through the galactic network faster than light itself. Within hours, every major civilization knew that the Vorkai had claimed humanity as kin, that a human diplomat had broken the unbreakable rule and survived, that Earth had somehow earned the respect of the galaxy's most feared warriors. Jake Collins spent the first day after the incident in the medical bay, where human doctors worked alongside the Vorkai healer Throck to repair his damaged ankle. The combination of human medical technology and Vorkai healing knowledge proved remarkably effective, and the prognosis was better than Jake had dared hope. You will walk normally within 3 of your days, Throck told him, applying a pace that numbed pain and accelerated bone healing. The injury was significant but clean. No permanent damage if you rest and allow proper recovery. Jake lay back on the medical bed, still processing everything that had happened. Thank you, Throck. I appreciate your help. The young Vorkai's amber eyes brightened slightly. You are kin now. We care for our own. This is not favor, but duty and honor. Ben Morris burst into the medical bay, his datapad glowing with notifications. Ambassador, you need to see this. The communication requests are overwhelming. How many? Jake asked, though he suspected the answer would be high. 217 species have requested formal meetings with the Earth delegation, Ben said, his voice filled with disbelief. Trade proposals, cultural exchanges, defense pacts, research partnerships. Species that wouldn't give us the time of day a week ago are now offering agreements that usually take years to negotiate. Jake pushed himself up on his elbows, ignoring the protest from his ankle. 217? And counting, Ben confirmed. The Vorkai endorsement carries enormous weight. Everyone knows that Krelver doesn't make empty gestures. If he claims Earth as kin, other species see it as validation that humanity is worth their attention. Over the next several days, Jake's medical bay room became an unlikely center of diplomatic activity. Species representatives came in a steady stream, each offering proposals and seeking Earth's cooperation. The Zelnari, an aquatic species in mobile water tanks, offered advanced water purification technology in exchange for Earth's music and art. The Thornuk, beings of living crystal, proposed a research partnership to study human adaptability and resilience. Even species that had seemed hostile during the initial briefings now approached with respect and interest. The Kravaks, warrior beings who valued strength above all else, sent envoys to discuss military training exchanges, but the most surprising visit came from the Chittick family whose child Jake had saved. The parents entered the medical bay with their child between them, all three moving with the careful grace of insectoid beings. They approached Jake's bed and performed a complex gesture that his translator identified as profound gratitude. "We are Lin and Pak," the parent identified as Lin said. "Our child is called Zix. We owe you a life debt that can never be repaid." Jake smiled at the small Chittick, who watched him with multifaceted eyes. "I'm just glad Zix is safe. Any parent would have done the same, but you are not Zix's parent," Pak said gently. "You are not even the same species. Yet you risked everything to save our child. This is the mark of true compassion, of genuine goodness that crosses all boundaries." The Chittick couple presented Jake with a crystal data storage device. "This contains the complete genetic database of our homeworld's plant life," Lin explained. "Thousands of species, many with remarkable medicinal properties. Our Science Council offers this as a gift to Earth, along with full trade agreements and cultural exchange programs. Your child's life is worth more than any database," Jake said, accepting the crystal. "But Earth will treasure this gift and honor the friendship you offer." After the Chittick family left, Ben pulled up a chair beside Jake's bed. "Do you understand what's happening, sir? One action, one moment of instinct, and you've opened doors for Earth that diplomats usually spend decades trying to unlock." Jake looked at his injured ankle, wrapped in both human bandages and Vorkai healing paste. "I didn't think about opening doors. I just couldn't let that child die. That's exactly why it worked," a deep voice said from the doorway. Krelver entered the medical bay, his massive form somehow moving gracefully through the human-sized space. Throck immediately stood and bowed to his ambassador, who returned the gesture with obvious affection. "How does our kin recover?" Krelver asked, approaching Jake's bed. "Well, thanks to Throck's skill," Jake replied. "I should be walking soon." Krelver settled onto his haunches beside the bed, bringing his head level with Jake's. "I have come to speak with you about what happens next, but also to tell you more about my people, so you understand the significance of what occurred over the next hour." Krelver shared the history of the Vorkai in a way that the official briefings had never captured. He spoke of a time 12,000 years ago when his people nearly destroyed themselves in endless clan warfare. When strength meant only the ability to kill and dominate. "We were monsters then," Krelver said quietly. "We used our power only to take, to conquer, to prove our superiority. Entire clans were wiped out in feuds that lasted generations. Then came a teacher named Vorik, a warrior who had seen too much death and decided there had to be a better way. Vorak proposed a radical idea, that the strong existed not to dominate the weak but to protect them. My people laughed at him at first." Krelver continued. "They called him soft, weak, unworthy of Vorkai blood. But Vorak challenged the strongest warriors to combat, and he defeated them all. He proved that compassion and strength were not opposites but complements. Vorak's teaching became the foundation of modern Vorkai culture. They remained fearsome warriors, but now they channeled that strength toward protection rather than conquest. They became peacekeepers, defenders of the innocent, guardians of those who could not guard themselves. The rule about touch stems from this philosophy, Krelver explained. Physical contact is sacred because it represents relationship, connection, commitment. When someone touches us, they declare the nature of our bond. Most fear this rule because they think it restricts them, threatens them. He paused, his amber eyes focusing on Jake with intensity. But the rule actually invites genuine connection. Those who touch us with true purpose, with honest intent, with real need, they show us their character in that moment. Your touch told me everything about humanity that I needed to know. Jake absorbed this information, understanding now why his instinctive action had such profound meaning. You saw that I would protect the innocent without calculating the cost. I saw that your species carries the same truth we learned 12,000 years ago, Krelver confirmed. That true strength serves life, not death. That power means nothing if not used to guard the vulnerable. That sometimes the right action requires breaking rules. Ben, who had been listening silently, spoke up. Ambassador Krelver, what does it mean for Earth to be claimed as Vorkai kin? What obligations does this create? Krelver's expression became serious. It means that attacks on human interests will be treated as attacks on Vorkai. It means we will share our trade networks, our military training, our cultural knowledge. It means Earth has allies who will stand beside them in crisis. And what does Earth owe the Vorkai in return? Ben asked. Nothing, Krelver said simply. Kin relationships are not transactional. We do not keep ledgers of debts and favors. You have shown yourselves worthy through Jake's actions. And that is enough. Over the following days, Jake received more visitors. Vera came to discuss Earth's history, fascinated by the parallels between human development and Vorkai evolution. Both species had struggled with warfare. Both had eventually learned to channel their strength toward protection rather than destruction. Spend hours with human military advisors, sharing tactical knowledge and learning about human approaches to combat. The young Vorkai was impressed by humanity's creativity, their ability to win through unconventional methods. But it was Krelver who became a regular presence in Jake's recovery. And through their conversations, a genuine friendship began to form. The massive Vorkai spoke of his 90 years of life, of the countless species he had met, of the rare individuals who possessed the clarity to act without hesitation when moments demanded it. Most beings are trapped by their thoughts, Krelver said during one visit. They hesitate because they calculate. They freeze because they consider consequences. But you, Jake Collins, you acted before thought could interfere. Sometimes I think that's not a virtue, Jake admitted. Sometimes I think I should have considered the consequences more carefully. Krelver made that rumbling sound that might be laughter. If you had considered consequences, the Chittit child would be dead. Paralysis by analysis is the enemy of action. Yes, thought has value, but there are moments when instinct must lead. Jake nodded slowly. Your culture values this? The ability to act without overthinking? We value wisdom that lives in the body as much as wisdom that lives in the mind, Krelver explained. True warriors don't think their way through combat. They train until right action becomes instinct. You showed us that humanity has good instincts, instincts that serve life. By the end of the week, Jake was walking again, his ankle healed enough to bear weight. Throck pronounced him fit for. The days following Jake's recovery brought changes that rippled through the entire diplomatic station. Human delegates who had arrived expecting to spend weeks begging for minor trade agreements now found themselves overwhelmed with offers and opportunities Lieutenant Ben Morris had practically taken up. Residence in the communications center, coordinating meetings and vetting proposals. He looked exhausted but energized, running on adrenaline and the thrill of watching Earth's galactic standing transform before his eyes. We have 3 more species requesting defense. Consultation meetings. Ben told Jake as they walked through the station's main corridor. The Yalish want to know if we'd consider joint military exercises. Apparently, word has spread about human tactical creativity. Jake limped slightly as they walked, his ankle still tender but functional. Defense consultations? We've been in space for 6 months. What could we possibly teach species that have been traveling the stars for millennia? According to the Yalish representative, our approach to asymmetric warfare is unique. Ben explained, pulling up data on his pad. Most galactic species fight with overwhelming force or superior technology. Humans fight with creativity, adaptation, and what they're calling aggressive improvisation. They entered the human delegation quarters where the rest of Earth's diplomatic team had gathered. 15 men and women who had come to the summit as hopeful newcomers and now found themselves at the center of galactic attention. Lisa Grant, the trade specialist, stood presenting holographic charts. The economic opportunities are staggering. We're being offered access to markets that usually require centuries of relationship building. The Vorkai endorsement has opened doors we didn't even know existed. Kevin Park, the cultural attach, added his observations. But we need to be careful. Some species are approaching us because they genuinely respect what Jake did. Others see an opportunity to curry favor with the Vorkai through us. We need to distinguish between authentic partnership and political maneuvering. Jake nodded, appreciating Kevin's wisdom. Good point. We should focus on building relationships with species that share our values, not just those seeking Vorkai connections. The discussion continued for hours, with the team analyzing each proposal and request. They established criteria for prioritizing meetings and developed strategies for long-term relationship building. Later that evening, Jake found himself back at the viewing platform where everything had started. He stood at the railing, looking down at the lower deck where he had caught the Chittick child, where he had broken the galaxy's most sacred rule. You return to this place often. Crover's voice came from behind him. Jake turned to find the massive Vorkai approaching silently. I keep thinking about that moment. Everything happened so fast, and yet it changed everything. Crover joined him at the railing, his amber eyes reflecting the stars visible through the dome above. Change often comes in moments, not movements. A single choice, a single action, and the future shifts onto a new path. They stood in companionable silence for a while. Jake had grown comfortable with Crover's presence over the past week, learning that beneath the fearsome exterior lived a being of deep thought and genuine warmth. I want to ask you something, Jake said finally. When I touched you, when I used your body to reach the child, what did you feel in that moment? Crover considered the question. Shock, initially. No one had dared touch me uninvited in decades. Then came recognition as I understood your intent. I saw the child falling, saw you calculate distances with your eyes, saw you realize I stood between you and your goal, and you didn't stop me. Jake noted. I could not have stopped you even if I wanted to, Crover said. You moved with the speed of pure instinct. By the time my mind processed what was happening, you were already airborne. But more importantly, I recognized the rightness of your action, even in that split second. The Vorkai shifted his weight, settling into a more relaxed posture. My people pride ourselves on our warrior instincts, our ability to act decisively in crisis. We trained for years to achieve what you did naturally. You saw need and responded without the paralysis of overthinking. Is that common among humans? Crover asked, this instinct to protect young, even those not of your species. Jake thought about Earth's history. Yes, I think so. Humans form bonds across species barriers easily. We keep animals as family members. We rescue wildlife from danger. We feel protective toward anything small and vulnerable. It's hardwired into us somehow. This explains much, Krelver rumbled thoughtfully. Vera has been studying your history, learning about human development. She tells me that humans domesticated other species, not through domination, but through mutual cooperation. You formed partnerships with wolves, cats, horses, all manner of creatures. We did, Jake confirmed. We saw other species not as tools or resources, but as potential companions. Partners, friends. Krelver's amber eyes glowed brighter. This is why I claimed you as kin. The Vorkai recognize beings who understand that strength serves connection, not conquest. You showed us in one moment what your entire species believes at its core. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Vera and two other Vorkai Jake hadn't met before. The young female approached with obvious respect. Ambassador Krelver, Jake Collins, she said. I bring representatives from the Vorkai Science Council. They wish to propose a research collaboration with Earth. The two new Vorkai were older, their obsidian fur marked with patterns that Jake was learning to read. These were scholars, their markings indicating specialization in biology and sociology. The elder of the two, a female named Kethra, spoke in careful Galactic Common. We have studied humanity's approach to interspecies relationships. Your history of animal domestication, your capacity for cross-species empathy, your instinct to protect the vulnerable regardless of genetic similarity. These traits are rare in the galaxy. Her companion, a male named Vorsek, continued. Most species develop strong in-group preferences. They protect their own kind but show limited concern for others. Humans seem to have evolved different instincts. You extend family bonds across enormous genetic distances. We would like to understand this trait, Kethra said, not to exploit it but to learn from it. The galaxy faces many challenges that require cooperation between vastly different species. Humanity's natural inclination toward cross-species partnership could provide insights. Jake glanced at Krelver, who nodded encouragingly. I think Earth would be honored to participate in such research, Jake said. But any study would need to be collaborative, with human scientists involved as equal partners. Of course, Vorsek agreed immediately. We seek understanding, not subjects. Vorkai science is built on respect and partnership. The conversation that followed laid groundwork for an unprecedented collaboration. Earth scientists would work with Vorkai researchers to study the biological and cultural factors that shaped humanity's unique approach to interspecies relationships. As the Vorkai scholars departed, Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Earth wasn't just making diplomatic connections anymore. They were being invited to contribute to galactic understanding in meaningful ways. The next day brought an unexpected challenge. A species called the Drex, aggressive traders with a reputation for sharp dealing, requested a meeting with Jake personally. Ben was suspicious. The Drex have never shown interest in human affairs before. Why the sudden attention? Jake reviewed the available information on the Drex. They were bipedal reptilians, skilled negotiators who often drove hard bargains. Not hostile, but certainly focused on their own interests. Let's hear what they have to say, Jake decided. But we'll be careful. The Drex representative, a sleek being named Scarth, entered the meeting room with obvious confidence. His scales gleamed under the station lights, and his eyes held the calculating intelligence of a born merchant. Ambassador Collins, Scarth began, his voice smooth and practiced. I come with a proposal that could benefit both our species greatly. I'm listening. Jake said neutral as Scarth outlined a trade agreement that sounded generous on the surface. The Drex would provide advanced manufacturing technology in exchange for Earth's agricultural products and cultural media. But as the conversation progressed, Jake noticed clauses that would give the Drex unfair advantages. Exclusivity agreements that would prevent Earth from trading with other species. Intellectual property terms that seemed designed to trap humans in dependent relationships. Ben caught Jake's eye. Clearly seeing the same problems. I appreciate the offer, Jake said carefully. But these terms don't work for Earth. We're interested in partnerships, not dependent relationships. Scarth's expression flickered. The Vorkai endorsement has given you confidence, I see. But remember, Ambassador, the Vorkai cannot solve all your problems. You still need practical partners for trade and technology. We need partners who respect us as equals, Jake replied firmly. Not partners who see us as convenient resources. The meeting ended without agreement, and Scarth left looking frustrated. Ben exhaled in relief. That could have gone badly if we'd accepted, he said. We need to remember that the Vorkai endorsement is a door opener, not a magic solution, Jake agreed. We still have to navigate galactic politics carefully. That evening, Jake shared the experience with Krelver. The final days of the Universal Species Summit arrived with a mixture of excitement and bittersweet awareness that this transformative period was ending. The closing ceremony would formalize all the agreements and partnerships established over the past 3 weeks. And Earth's delegation prepared to showcase how far they had come. Jake Collins stood in the human quarters, adjusting his formal diplomatic uniform while Ben Morris reviewed the schedule one last time. Jake's ankle had healed completely thanks to the combined efforts of human and Vorkai medicine, leaving him with only a small scar as a reminder of that pivotal moment. The ceremony begins in 2 hours, Ben said. Checking his datapad, Earth's formal presentation is scheduled right after the Vorkai, which is apparently a significant honor. Krelver requested the placement specifically. Lisa Grant entered with news. The final count is in. 47 species have signed formal agreements with Earth, ranging from trade partnerships to cultural exchanges to research collaborations. That's more than most species achieve in their first decade of galactic participation, Kevin Park added. And the informal connections are even more impressive. We've built relationships that will serve Earth for generations. The goodwill generated by Jake's actions has created opportunities we couldn't have imagined. Jake felt humbled by the scope of what had happened. One action, one moment, and all of this followed. That's how change works sometimes, Lisa said wisely. The right action at the right moment can shift entire paradigms. You showed the galaxy who humans are, and they responded. As they made their way to the Grand Atrium, Jake noticed how differently other species reacted to the human delegation now. Where once they had been met with polite disinterest or mild curiosity, now aliens of all kinds nodded respectfully, some even approaching to offer brief words of admiration. The atrium had been transformed for the closing ceremony. Holographic displays showcased each species' contributions to galactic society, and delegations assembled in positions that reflected their status and relationships. The Vorkai delegation stood in their traditional place of honor, and Jake felt warmth in his chest when he saw that a space had been reserved beside them for the humans. Krelver had ensured that Earth's new status would be physically demonstrated for all to see. Vera approached as the humans settled into their position. Jake Collins, the ceremony will include a formal recognition of the bond between Vorkai and humanity. Krelver wishes you to stand with him during the announcement. Jake glanced at his team, who nodded encouragement. I'd be honored. The ceremony began with the station administrator's opening remarks, praising the productive discussions and successful partnerships formed during the summit. One by one, species presented their achievements and announced new collaborations. When the Vorkai's turn came, Krelver stepped forward with Vera, Drekther, and Throck flanking him. The massive predators commanded immediate attention, their presence still inspiring awe despite weeks of familiarity. The HFY Collective recognizes the achievements of this summit. Krelver began, his deep voice carrying through the atrium. We have witnessed cooperation, understanding, and the formation of bonds that will strengthen galactic society. He paused, his amber eyes scanning the assembled delegates. But we have also witnessed something rarer, the revelation of character in crisis, the demonstration of values through action rather than words. Krelver gestured to Jake, who stepped forward to stand beside the massive HFY. 3 weeks ago, Ambassador Jake Collins of Earth broke the most sacred law of HFY culture. He touched me without permission, using my body as a tool to achieve his goal. The atrium fell silent. Every being focused on Krelver's words. By all traditions, this should have resulted in his death, Krelver continued. But traditions exist to serve principles, not to replace them. Jake Collins touched me in the act of saving an innocent child from death, acting on instinct faster than thought, prioritizing life above all other considerations, including his own safety. Krelver placed his massive paw on Jake's shoulder, the gesture now familiar and warm. In that moment, he showed us the heart of humanity, a species that extends protection across all boundaries, that acts to preserve life without calculation, that understands at an instinctive level what many species must learn through painful experience. The HFY ambassador's voice grew stronger, resonating with conviction. Therefore, the HFY Collective formally recognizes humanity as HFY kin. We pledge our protection, our partnership, and our respect. We open our trade networks, our training grounds, and our councils to Earth. We declare that humanity has earned its place among the stars, not through force or cunning, but through compassion and courage. The declaration was met with a wave of sound. Species chittering, humming, clicking, and speaking in hundreds of languages that blended into a symphony of acknowledgement. But Krelver wasn't finished. More than this, I personally claim Jake Collins as pack brother. He has shown himself worthy not just of respect, but of genuine affection. His friendship honors me and all HFY. Jake felt tears prick his eyes, overwhelmed by the public declaration. He managed to speak, his voice rough with emotion. The HFY honor me beyond measure. I acted on instinct, but I would choose the same action with full knowledge. Some things matter more than rules, more than safety, more than diplomatic protocols. Protecting the innocent is one of those things. The crowd erupted in approval, and Jake stepped back to allow the ceremony to continue. But as he returned to the human delegation area, he was intercepted by the Chittick family. Lynn and Pak approached with little Zix between them. The child had grown bolder over the past weeks, no longer shy around the human who had saved its life. Jake Collins, Lynn said formally. Our people wish to present Earth with a final gift in recognition of your actions. Pak held out a small object that gleamed with inner light. This is a Chittick memory crystal, encoding not just data but emotional resonance. It contains the gratitude of our entire species, preserved so that future generations will know what you did for our child. Jake accepted the crystal carefully. Your friendship is gift enough. Earth will treasure this bond. Zix chirped something in the Chittick language, and Lynn translated with obvious fondness. Zix says you are brave like the heroes in our stories. You will always be welcome on our homeworld. After the Chittick family departed, the ceremony continued with Earth's formal presentation. Jake spoke briefly about humanity's hopes for continued cooperation and learning, but he kept his remarks simple and heartfelt rather than grandiose. When he finished, something unexpected happened. Species after species stood in their delegation areas, a physical show of respect that the translator informed him was rarely given to newcomer civilizations. The Zelnari stood, their water tanks gleaming. The Thornuk rose, their crystalline bodies refracting light into rainbow patterns. The Yalish, the Krivaks, the Morlan, and dozens of others, all showing respect for Earth and what humanity represented even Some species that had been skeptical or dismissive weeks ago now stood, acknowledging that Jake's actions had proven something important about human character. As the ceremony concluded and delegates began to mingle one final time before departing, Jake found himself surrounded by well-wishers from across the galaxy. Conversations flowed in dozens of languages, creating connections that would last long after the summit ended. Ben appeared at Jake's elbow with a communication device. "Sir, there's a message from Earth. The Secretary General wants to speak with you." Jake excused himself and found a quiet corner to take the call. The Secretary General's face appeared on the screen, beaming with pride. "Ambassador Collins, I'm calling to inform you that your actions here have transformed Earth's standing in ways we're still calculating. You've done more for humanity in 3 weeks than we dared hope for in 3 years. I just did what felt right." "Madam Secretary," Jake replied, "which is exactly why it worked," she said. "We're implementing new protocols based on what you've taught us, but sometimes instinct matters more than procedure. That genuine compassion opens more doors than calculated strategy. That being truly human is our greatest diplomatic asset." After the call ended, Jake rejoined the gathering. He found Krelver standing with Vera and the other young Vorkai, speaking with human military advisors about training exchange programs. The Vorkai ambassador noticed Jake and rumbled a greeting. "Come, pack brother. Vera wishes to show the humans some of our combat philosophy." What followed was a demonstration that left the human observers fascinated. Vera moved through forms that emphasized protection over aggression, showing how Vorkai combat techniques focused on defending the vulnerable rather than destroying opponents. "True strength doesn't announce itself," Vera explained as she demonstrated. "It exists quietly until needed, then acts decisively. The greatest warriors are those who prevent violence rather than excel at it." Jake watched, recognizing the philosophy that had shaped his own actions weeks ago. He had acted to prevent harm, not to prove anything or gain advantage. And that instinct had resonated with the Vorkai at the deepest level as evening approached and delegates began departing for their ships. Jake stood one final time at the viewing platform where everything had begun. He looked down at the lower deck, remembering the fear